doing differently or thinking about, or do they would everything just kind of carry on kind
I
of?
think in some ways, I think if this had happened, like if the first outbreak had happened in kind of like June or July,
Mhm.
where that first initial thing of like hiring freezes and like all freelancers being let go, like in, you know, that first kind of wave of like, okay, we need to slim down, that would have been a lot worse considering that's when all the students were kind of like looking for work. So in some ways, I think that the timing there was a little bit easier. I think the there's something that me and Chris have been talking about, which is that perhaps the landscape for employment changes in terms of employers are perhaps going to want to, when they've gone through something of having uh, people that work for them and then being in a place to having to slim down or grow again.
Mm.
I wonder whether these kind of like permalance contracts, you know, these kind of like really flexible contracts are going to become more the norm,
Mm.
um, and whether people who are looking for and which is what employers will want, and then in some ways it's the other way around for people looking for jobs, which is like when you've seen this kind of thing happen, you want security.
Yeah.
So there's like that's a kind of like strange imbalance that I could kind of see happening. But that wasn't your question really. So I think I think the in terms of approaching work, I think the way that you should go about it, I can imagine being the same. Like uh, the same workflows, the same ways of doing things. Like obviously, don't send out a BCC blanket email to 200 people. Like do your research, find the right people, personalize the way you approach
Mhm.
different studios.
Mhm.
Like use LinkedIn, find out about their work, find out about the individual, show that you care and that
Yeah.
you why. I mean, it's in the same way that like we approach new business or working with other people.
Mhm.
You have to do your research and you have to show that you kind of have that. And I think like that's not going to change at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm totally with you on that. It's kind of, I often find that a lot of the things that might appear to be a kind of handy shortcut, you're
Yeah,
actually completely undermining longer term any attempts that you might, successful attempts you might have in terms of like building those initial relationships. So
yeah,
certainly over the last few weeks, I've had a lot of students ask if they should, for the time being, they should hold off sending their portfolios to students,
mm,
hold off
mm,
job applications. And for me,
mm,
it's just like, again, so
yeah,
long as you're doing your research, if it's someone who's been on social media and said, these are in this unprecedented time, we've had to close our business, very sad time for everyone, mega stressed out, probably don't
yeah,
send a job application.
yeah. It's probably slightly inappropriate. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, in some ways it's well, not in some ways it's of course now exponentially harder. It was never easy to get an internship or get the attention of someone running a design studio through
Yeah.
sending a portfolio email because of the sheer like volume that people receive.
Yeah.
So now that's like I would imagine has increased tenfold. So that's tricky. But then the challenge remains and was the same before. How do you set yourself apart in that climate of that being the way that people approach people? And um the postal service is still happening. That's a way of getting it. Obviously, you need to know the person's home address, which is tricky. But I mean, it might be that takes stalking perhaps to a slightly another level that we shouldn't encourage. But I mean, I think that there's other ways of introducing yourself to people that aren't like one for one kind of thing. So there's definitely ways around it, but I think there's no denying that it's tricky. And I think the idea of holding off. I mean, I think, like I say, if you'd have tried a month ago, then I think that would have been really hard. But from the sounds of it, people who let all the freelancers, like the big studios that let a lot of the freelancers go, are now steadily it's kind of building back up again. So yeah, it's a really tricky thing to
Mm.
negotiate, I think.
So kind of picking up a bit on some of the stuff you were saying
Mm,
before, kind of following on from what we're talking